Little grizzly bear. Cub was drowning in the water. What this human baby did put everyone in shock. Let us know where you're watching from. The morning sun filtered through the towering pines of Whispering Woods, casting dappled shadows across the flowing waters of Silver Creek. The gentle babbling of the stream provided a soothing soundtrack to what began as an ordinary spring day. Olivia and Nathan Mitchell had brought their 18-month-old daughter, Lily, for her first proper picnic by the water's edge. The toddler, with curious eyes that sparkled like the creek itself, had only recently mastered walking and viewed the world with unbridled wonder. "Look, Lily," Olivia pointed toward a butterfly dancing above the wildflowers. "Isn't it pretty?" Lily giggled, her tiny hands reaching toward the colorful wings, but the butterfly fluttered away, leading her gaze toward another marvel. Just upstream, partially hidden behind a cluster of rocks, a mother grizzly bear and her cub had emerged from the forest to drink from the clear waters. The mother bear cautiously scanned the surroundings while her cub, no larger than a medium-sized dog, playfully pawed at the water's surface. Nathan noticed them first, his hand instinctively tightening around his phone. "Olivia," he whispered urgently, "don't make any sudden movements. There's a bear upstream." Olivia's face paled as she slowly turned her head. "Where's Lily?" she asked, her voice barely audible as panic began rising in her chest. Their daughter had wandered a few yards away, still following the path of the butterfly, completely unaware of the potential danger lurking nearby. The parents froze, caught in the impossible dilemma of needing to reach their child without startling the bears. The mother bear suddenly stiffened, her sensitive nose catching the scent of humans. She grunted softly to her cub, a warning to stay close. But the young bear, overcome with curiosity and playfulness, continued splashing at the edge of the creek, each movement taking it farther from its mother's protective watch. Time seemed to slow as a series of events unfolded with terrifying speed. The bear cub, reaching for a glimmering fish beneath the surface, leaned too far forward. Its small paws slipped on the slick stones, and with a startled yelp, it tumbled headfirst into the deeper part of the creek. The current, deceptively strong beneath the calm surface, immediately caught the cub's small body and began carrying it downstream. "Bah!" Lily exclaimed, pointing toward the struggling cub as it thrashed against the water. The toddler's innocent expression shifted to concern as she watched the small bear being swept away, its panicked cries echoing through the woods. The mother bear roared in distress, racing along the bank, but the steep, rocky embankment prevented her from reaching her cub. Her powerful claws scraped against stone as she desperately tried to find a way down to the water. Her eyes widened with fear as she watched her baby struggling against the current, its small head repeatedly disappearing beneath the surface. Nathan and Olivia remained paralyzed, torn between reaching for their daughter and staying still to avoid attracting the mother bear's attention. "Lily, come here," Nathan called softly, extending his hand toward his daughter, but Lily's attention remained fixed on the drowning cub. With the innocent compassion that only a child could possess, Lily took unsteady steps toward the water's edge. Before her parents could react, she had reached the creek, just as the struggling cub was passing by their picnic spot. The bear cub's terrified eyes met Lily's, a moment of connection between two young souls, one fighting for its life, the other witnessing suffering she couldn't possibly understand, but instinctively wanted to end. "Lily, no," Olivia screamed, lunging forward as her daughter leaned precariously over the water's edge, her small hand reaching toward the drowning cub. Time itself seemed to hold its breath, as parents, child, and bears faced a moment that would forever change them all. The cub's desperate paws thrashed as it tried to keep its head above water, Its strength was failing quickly, each struggle weaker than the last. As it passed the spot where Lily stood, it gave one final attempt to grab onto anything that might save it, and found the extended hand of a human baby. What happened next would leave everyone who witnessed it in complete shock, a moment where the boundaries between human and animal dissolved in the face of pure innocence and unexpected courage. Lily's tiny fingers grasped at the wet fur of the cub's ear, the only part she could reach. It wasn't a strong grip. How could it be from such a small child? But it was enough to momentarily stop the cub's downstream drift. The cub, acting on instinct, latched onto this unexpected lifeline, swinging its claws gently catching on the sleeve of Lily's pink sweater. The weight of the waterlogged cub began pulling Lily forward. She teetered at the edge, her balance precarious as water splashed around her tiny shoes. Nathan and Olivia were now running toward their daughter, hearts pounding with terror at what seemed inevitable. Their baby falling into the rushing creek alongside the bear cub. The mother bear, seeing her cub make contact with the human child, let out another roar. But there was a different quality to this sound, almost a note of desperate hope amid the fear. She scrambled down the embankment, rocks tumbling beneath her massive paws, as she finally found a path to the water's edge. She charged downstream, her eyes fixed on her cub and the small human connected to it. Nathan reached Lily just as she began to tip forward. He grabbed his daughter around the waist, but found himself in an impossible situation. Pulling her back would break her grip on the cub, potentially condemning the young bear to drown. Letting her maintain her hold risked putting his daughter in the path of an approaching mother bear. In that frozen moment, Nathan made a decision that defied logical explanation. He supported Lily's weight while allowing her to maintain her grip on the struggling cub. The mother bear splashed into the shallow water just feet away from them. Time froze as Nathan found himself staring directly into the eyes of the massive grizzly. He saw not mindless aggression but the desperate love of a mother for her child, a feeling he understood all too well in that moment. The bear's breath came in heavy pants as she assessed the situation, her powerful jaws more than capable of ending both Nathan and Lily with a single bite. Instead, the mother bear did something that defied everything Nathan had ever heard about bear encounters. She carefully approached, her movements deliberately slow, and gently took her cub by the scruff of the neck. As the cub released its grip on Lily's sweater, Nathan pulled his daughter back to safety, cradling her against his chest as he slowly backed away. The mother bear pulled her cub from the water, placing it gently on the shore. The young bear coughed, water streaming from its fur as it shivered and whimpered. Then, still holding her human gaze, the mother bear did something truly remarkable. She dipped her massive head once, a gesture that looked uncannily like a nod of acknowledgement, before turning and guiding her cub back toward the safety of the forest. Olivia reached Nathan and Lily, tears streaming down her face as she embraced them both. "What just happened?" she whispered, her voice trembling with the aftershocks of fear and wonder. Lily, seemingly unaware of the miracle she had just participated in, pointed toward the retreating bears. "Baby," she said simply, her first real word of the day. Later, as park rangers took their report, they would explain how extraordinary the encounter had been. "In all my years," said Senior Ranger Thomas Wilson, "I've never heard of anything like this. A mother bear allowing humans near her cub, much less in a rescue situation. It's unprecedented." The story spread quickly through local news, then national, and finally international media. Wildlife experts debated the meaning of the bear's behavior, some suggesting that maternal instinct had transcended species boundaries in that moment of crisis. Others pointed to the innocence of a human child, untainted by fear or preconception, as the factor that had made such an impossible connection possible. For the Mitchell family, the explanation was simpler. There was a moment, Nathan would later tell reporters, when that mother bear and I looked at each other, and we weren't different species anymore. We were just two parents who would do anything to protect our children. As for little Lily, she remained blissfully unaware of her brief fame. In the years that followed, her parents would tell her the story of the day she reached out to save a drowning bear cub, hoping that same instinctive compassion would guide her throughout her life. And deep in the forests of Whispering Woods, a young bear grew strong and healthy, carrying with it the memory of small, gentle hands that had reached out when it needed them most. A reminder that kindness knows no boundaries, not even those between species. Wildlife researchers who later studied footage captured by another hiker's camera theorized that the mother bear might have been one of the cubs born in a conservation program years earlier, one that had been briefly handled by humans before being successfully reintroduced to the wild. Perhaps some distant memory of human kindness had influenced her unusual response. But for those who witnessed the event firsthand, no scientific explanation could fully capture the profound connection they had seen between two different worlds. 3 months after the incident, the Mitchells received an unexpected call from Ranger Wilson. "There's something you should see," he said cryptically, inviting them back to a special observation area in the park. When they arrived, Wilson led them to a secluded viewing platform overlooking a small meadow. "Wait here quietly," he instructed, his voice barely containing his excitement. "They usually come around this time." As the afternoon sun began its descent behind the mountains, a rustling in the tall grass caught their attention. The mother bear emerged from the tree line, her cub following closely behind. The young bear had grown noticeably larger, its movements more confident as it explored the meadow. "We've been tracking them," Wilson whispered. "They've changed their territory. This isn't where they usually roam." Olivia gasped softly. "They've moved closer to the visitor areas?" Wilson nodded. "It defies everything we know about bear behavior, especially for a mother with a cub. She should be seeking more isolation, not less. But here's the truly extraordinary part. Watch the cub." The young bear suddenly stood on its hind legs, nose twitching as it sampled the air. Then, to everyone's astonishment, it began walking toward the observation platform, stopping occasionally to look back at its mother as if seeking permission. The mother bear watched attentively, but made no move to call her cub back. "This is unprecedented," Wilson breathed. "It's almost like they're visiting," Nathan finished, his voice hushed with wonder. Lily, now 21 months old and with a growing vocabulary, pointed excitedly. "Bear, my bear!" she exclaimed, somehow understanding the significance of the moment despite her young age. At the sound of her voice, the cub tilted its head curiously. For several minutes, bear and humans regarded each other across the distance, a distance that remained safe but felt somehow smaller than the usual gulf between wild and domesticated worlds. The mother bear eventually called her cub with a soft grunt, and both animals disappeared back into the forest. But this would not be their last encounter. Over the next 2 years, something remarkable happened in Whispering Woods. The mother bear and her growing cub became something of a phenomenon in wildlife research circles. Unlike other bears that actively avoided human contact, this pair seemed to maintain a cautious but deliberate presence near designated observation areas. They never approached humans directly after that first encounter, never sought food or created conflict, but they allowed themselves to be seen in ways that other bears simply didn't. Researchers from around the country came to study this unusual behavior, setting up cameras and observation posts throughout the woods. What they documented challenged many long-held beliefs about wild animal behavior and cognition. It's as though they recognize that not all humans are threats, explained Dr. Eleanor Chen, a leading animal behaviorist who came to study the bears. This doesn't mean they're tame. They're still very much wild animals, but they're showing a level of discernment that we previously thought impossible. For the Mitchell family, the story took another unexpected turn when they purchased a small cabin near the edge of the national park. It was meant to be a weekend retreat, a place where Lily could grow up appreciating nature. They were careful to follow all safety protocols, securing garbage, never leaving food outside, installing proper barriers. On a crisp autumn morning during their third weekend at the cabin, Olivia was washing dishes at the kitchen sink when movement outside the window caught her eye. She froze, the plate in her hand forgotten, as she stared in disbelief. At the edge of their yard, just where the maintained lawn gave way to wild underbrush, stood the mother bear and her cub, now nearly an adolescent, though still recognizable by a distinctive patch of lighter fur around its right ear. They weren't approaching the house or showing any aggressive behavior. They were simply watching. "Nathan," Olivia called softly, not wanting to startle the bears or alarm her husband. "Nathan, they're here." He joined her at the window, Lily toddling behind him. The little girl's face lit up with recognition and delight. "My bears," she exclaimed, pressing her small palms against the glass. Whether it was coincidence or something more profound, the bears appeared near the Mitchells' cabin with surprising regularity after that first sighting. Always at a safe distance, never threatening, but unmistakably present. It was as though they were maintaining a connection that logic said shouldn't exist. Park officials were both fascinated and concerned by this development. They installed additional cameras around the Mitchell property and assigned a part-time ranger to monitor the situation. What they observed defied conventional wildlife management wisdom. "We've never seen anything like this," admitted Regional Wildlife Director James Patterson during a private meeting with the Mitchells. "These bears aren't displaying food-seeking behavior. They're not becoming habituated in the dangerous way we typically see. They're simply coexisting." The story might have remained a curious but private phenomenon if not for what happened during Lily's 4th birthday party. The Mitchells had invited a small group of friends and family to the cabin for a celebration. Children played in the yard under careful supervision, with regular bear awareness checks of the surroundings, now a standard practice for the family. During the cake cutting, a commotion at the edge of the property drew everyone's attention. The adolescent bear, now nearly grown but still living within its mother's territory, contrary to typical bear behavior, had appeared at the tree line. Several parents gasped, immediately gathering their children close. "It's okay," Nathan assured them, though he too felt the instinctive flutter of concern in his chest. "Just stay together and remain calm." What happened next would be captured on video by Lily's uncle, and would eventually be seen by millions around the world. The young bear gently placed something on the ground at the edge of the yard, a freshly caught fish, still glistening in the sunlight. Then, with a final look toward the gathering, it turned and lumbered back into the protection of the forest. Marine biologist Dr. Marcus Rivera, who later analyzed the footage, offered perhaps the most compelling interpretation. What we're seeing might be one of the most primitive forms of gift-giving behavior across species boundaries. In the bear's limited understanding, it's offering something of value, food, to beings it is somehow categorized as non-threatening, perhaps even as something approximating what we might call friends. The video sparked intense debate in scientific communities and captured the public's imagination. Terms like interspecies bonding and animal gratitude began appearing in respected journals, alongside more skeptical explanations involving coincidence and anthropomorphization. For the Mitchells, however, the explanation was less important than the lived experience. They had become reluctant participants in what some called a miracle, and others called a scientific anomaly. They established the Silver Creek Wildlife Foundation, dedicated to promoting more nuanced understanding of human-wildlife coexistence. Lily grew into a thoughtful, compassionate child with an uncanny affinity for animals. By the time she was 7, she had decided to become an animal doctor and a scientist, declaring with the certainty only children can muster that she would help humans understand bears better. The mother bear eventually passed away, as is the natural order of things, but her offspring, now a mature adult, continued the unusual pattern of distant but deliberate coexistence with the human world. DNA testing of shed fur found near the Mitchell property confirmed it was indeed the same bear that Lily had helped save years earlier. On Lily's 10th birthday, the family held a private ceremony by Silver Creek, at the exact spot where a tiny hand had once reached out to a drowning cub. They placed a small, unobtrusive marker there. Not a grand monument, but a simple stone bearing the engraved outline of a child's hand next to a bear's paw. Beneath these images were words that had come to define not just one miraculous moment, but the remarkable journey that followed. What separates us is less powerful than what connects us. Compassion knows no bounds. Researchers continue to study the behavioral patterns established by this unique bear family, and the implications have rippled through wildlife management practices worldwide. Some bears in the region now display behaviors that suggest knowledge can be transmitted culturally through generations, a finding that has transformed our understanding of these complex creatures. As for Lily Mitchell, now studying biology at a prestigious university, her childhood experience has shaped her life's mission. "I don't remember the moment itself," she often explains when asked about the famous incident. "But I've grown up with its legacy, with the understanding that barriers between species aren't as impenetrable as we once thought." When asked if she believes the bear actually remembered her, if the years of unusual encounters were truly a form of gratitude or recognition, Lily offers a thoughtful smile. "Science requires evidence, and the evidence suggests something profound happened," she says. "But some connections transcend our need for explanation. Sometimes it's enough to simply recognize that in a moment of need, boundaries disappeared, and neither world has been quite the same since." The story of Lily and the bear took yet another unexpected turn during her second year at university. While presenting her preliminary research at an international wildlife conservation conference, she was approached by an elderly indigenous man who introduced himself as Joseph Running Elk, a tribal elder from a nearby nation. "I've been following your story since you were a child," he told her, his weathered face creasing into a gentle smile. "What happened between you and the bear? My people have stories of such things going back hundreds of years." Joseph invited Lily to visit his reservation, explaining that his grandmother had been a keeper of old stories, many involving sacred connections between children and animals. Intrigued by the possibility of cultural contexts that Western science had overlooked, Lily accepted. What she learned during her visits to the reservation added layers of meaning to her experience that no scientific paper had captured. Joseph shared ancient oral traditions describing spirit bonds between certain children and animals, connections that transcended ordinary boundaries and often lasted lifetimes. "In our oldest stories," Joseph explained as they sat beside a ceremonial fire, "there are children born with the ability to speak without words to our four-legged relatives. Not like a Disney movie," he chuckled, "but a deeper understanding, a recognition that passes between hearts rather than minds." The elder showed Lily rock paintings dating back centuries that depicted small human figures standing alongside bears, wolves, and eagles. In one particularly striking image, a child's hand reached toward a bear cub, surrounded by wavy lines that clearly represented water. "This cannot be a coincidence," Lily whispered, tracing her fingers over the ancient artwork. "My grandmother would say there are no coincidences when it comes to such bonds," Joseph replied. "Only patterns we haven't recognized yet." The indigenous perspective provided Lily with a framework that bridged the gap between scientific observation and lived experience. She incorporated these cultural insights into her research, proposing that traditional ecological knowledge might help explain anomalous animal behaviors that defied conventional scientific categorization. Her interdisciplinary approach was initially met with skepticism in academic circles, but gained traction when several other documented cases of unusual human-animal interactions emerged following publicity about her work. In northern Canada, a wolf pack had repeatedly led lost hikers back to trails over a period of decades. In Indonesia, a family of orangutans had been documented sharing fruit with a local child who had once shared food with them during a drought. In Australia, a pod of dolphins had developed a multi-generational habit of herding fish toward the shores of a specific Aboriginal community. "What we're discovering," Lily explained during a TED Talk that would eventually garner millions of views, "is that the boundaries between human and animal consciousness may be more permeable than we've assumed. These aren't just heartwarming anecdotes. They're data points suggesting something profound about interspecies connections that we're only beginning to understand." During Lily's final year of university, a devastating wildfire swept through portions of Whispering Woods. The Mitchell cabin was spared, but large sections of forest habitat were destroyed. Wildlife officials worked tirelessly to assess the impact on animal populations, setting up emergency feeding stations and monitoring displacement patterns. Amidst this crisis, something extraordinary happened. The adult bear, now identifiable by both its distinctive ear marking and GPS collar data, was observed leading a group of younger bears away from the fire's path days before the blaze reached their territory. Thermal imaging from forestry aircraft showed the bears moving with clear purpose toward a safe river valley that would remain untouched by the flames. "It's as though it knew," marveled Dr. Chen, who had continued studying this remarkable bear throughout its life. "The movement patterns indicate deliberate navigation away from danger before there were obvious sensory cues. We've documented bears sensing impending natural disasters before, but the organized movement of multiple bears following a single leader is unprecedented." More remarkable still was what happened after the fire. As habitat restoration efforts began, wildlife cameras captured images of the bear and its group returning to the burned areas. But instead of merely foraging, they were observed engaging in behavior that defied explanation. The bears were seemingly burying pine cones and dragging fallen seeds into burned clearings, effectively accelerating the forest's natural regeneration process. "Bears are known to inadvertently disperse seeds through their scat," explained botanist Dr. Priya Sharma, who specialized in post-fire forest recovery. But this deliberate seed planting behavior has never been documented. It's as though these bears are actively participating in forest restoration. When these findings were published, debate erupted in scientific communities. Some researchers suggested the behavior represented an evolutionary adaptation to fire-prone environments. Others proposed it might be learned behavior resulting from observing human restoration efforts. A few wondered aloud if the unusual human connections in this bear's history might have influenced its understanding of ecosystem management. For Lily, now completing her doctoral research, the explanation incorporated elements of all these theories, but went further. What we're witnessing might be the emergence of collaborative ecosystem stewardship across species boundaries, she proposed in her dissertation. The capacity for interspecies cooperation may be latent in many animals, emerging under specific conditions of mutual recognition and shared environmental challenges. On the 10th anniversary of the original rescue, the Mitchell family organized a special gathering at Silver Creek. What had begun as a small family commemoration grew into something larger when Joseph Running Elk asked permission to include a traditional ceremony honoring the bear-human connection. Soon, wildlife researchers, conservation advocates, and even a small documentary film crew had joined the event. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Joseph led the assembled group in a ceremony involving sacred songs and offerings of tobacco. "We acknowledge the wisdom of our relatives who walk on 4 legs," his voice resonated across the clearing. "We honor the connections that remind us we are all part of one great circle of life." Nathan and Olivia Mitchell, now with gray streaking their hair, stood proudly beside their daughter. Lily had grown into a poised young woman of 20, her childhood innocence transformed into purposeful compassion and scientific curiosity. As the ceremony concluded, a hushed murmur spread through the gathering. At the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by shadows, stood a massive grizzly bear, unmistakably the same one from years before, its distinctive ear marking visible even in the fading light. Beside it stood a younger bear, presumably its offspring from a recent season. Park rangers present at the event moved cautiously toward their vehicles, reaching for tranquilizer equipment, but Lily raised her hand in a gentle gesture of restraint. "Wait," she said softly. "Just watch." The older bear remained at the forest's edge, making no move to approach the humans but clearly visible to everyone present. It rose briefly onto its hind legs, towering over 7 feet tall, a posture that could have seemed threatening but somehow didn't. Instead, it appeared to be taking in the gathering, surveying the humans who had assembled to commemorate a moment that had changed the course of many lives. After several breathtaking minutes, the bear dropped back to all fours, nudged its younger companion, and disappeared into the deepening twilight of the forest. No one spoke for several moments, the collective experience too profound for immediate words. Later that evening, as the gathering dispersed, Joseph approached Lily with a small wooden carving, a bear and a human hand, intricately intertwined. "My grandmother told me that when a spirit bond is formed, it continues across generations," he said, placing the carving in her hands. "What began with you and that bear cub has grown into something larger than either of you. The ripples move outward, touching many lives." The documentary film about Lily and the bear, titled The Reach, was released the following year to critical acclaim. More than just another wildlife story, it explored the philosophical and scientific implications of interspecies empathy through the lens of one extraordinary relationship. The film featured interviews with researchers across disciplines, indigenous knowledge keepers, and conservation advocates, all reflecting on what this single encounter might teach humanity about our place within the natural world. In the film's most powerful scene, Lily returned to Silver Creek alone, sitting quietly by the water's edge as she reflected on the chain of events set in motion by a moment she couldn't even remember firsthand. "I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what happened here," she said, her voice carrying over footage of the original rescue that had been captured by the hiker's camera years before. "Science gives us frameworks for understanding. Traditional knowledge offers perspectives our modern world has forgotten, but some connections simply need to be experienced to be fully comprehended." She paused, trailing her fingers through the clear water, the same water that had once carried a struggling bear cub toward an uncertain fate. What I do know is this. When we reach across the boundaries that seem to separate us from the rest of life on this planet, we discover those boundaries are more permeable than we imagined. And in that reaching, something fundamental changes, not just for the individuals involved, but for everyone touched by the story. The bear's influence extended far beyond its forest home. The research inspired by its unusual behavior led to revised wildlife management protocols that incorporated more nuanced understanding of animal cognition and adaptability. The Silver Creek Wildlife Foundation, established by the Mitchells, funded scholarships for students pursuing interdisciplinary approaches to conservation science. Perhaps most significantly, the story entered the cultural consciousness as a symbol of unexpected connection across seemingly insurmountable differences. In a world often defined by conflict and separation, the image of a small child reaching out to save a drowning bear cub offered a powerful counter-narrative about what might be possible when compassion overrides fear. Years later, when Lily Mitchell became doctor, Mitchell and established the Center for Interspecies Communication Studies at a prestigious university, she kept the wooden carving Joseph had given her displayed prominently on her desk. It served as a daily reminder that the most profound scientific discoveries often begin with a moment of connection that defies conventional explanation. And deep in the forests of Whispering Woods, new generations of bears continue to display behaviors not seen in other populations, approaching certain observation areas with cautious curiosity rather than fear, cooperating in ways that benefit the broader ecosystem, and occasionally, in moments rarely captured but deeply treasured by those fortunate enough to witness them, acknowledging human observers with a gaze that seems to contain recognition that transcends species boundaries. The young bear, who once nearly drowned in Silver Creek, eventually passed away, as all beings must, but the legacy of that single moment when small hands reached out across the divide between worlds continues to ripple outward, touching lives both human and wild in ways that remind us of a fundamental truth too often forgotten in our modern world. Compassion knows no bounds. And in the space between one heartbeat and the next, between one outstretched hand and another's desperate need, entire universes of possibility can open. Did this moment take your breath away? Share this story to remind the world that even the smallest hands can create the biggest miracles, and that compassion knows no bounds. But the story doesn't end here, for in the spring following Dr. Lily Mitchell's appointment to her university position, a student research assistant burst into her office with extraordinary news. Wildlife cameras positioned throughout Whispering Woods had captured something unprecedented. Bears from the original bear's lineage appeared to be actively seeking opportunities for safe, distant observation of humans. More remarkably, they were bringing their cubs to specific viewing locations, as though deliberately introducing them to the strange two-legged creatures who shared their forest home. It's as if they're teaching their young that humans aren't just threats to be avoided, the excited student explained, spreading photos across Lily's desk. They're treating us as a separate but important species to be understood. This behavior, eventually termed intentional acclimatization in the scientific literature, sparked a new wave of research into animal cultural transmission and interspecies socialization. The bears of Whispering Woods became the focus of a long-term generational study that would eventually document the emergence of distinct behavioral traditions within this specific population. Traditions that appeared to include a unique relationship with humans, not based on food conditioning, but on what some researchers cautiously termed mutual recognition. On Lily's 35th birthday, now married and with a young daughter of her own, she received a package from Joseph Running Elk's grandson. The elder had passed away the previous winter, but had left instructions for this package to be delivered on this specific date. Inside, Lily found an ancient ceremonial blanket and a handwritten letter. Joseph's neat, careful script explained that the blanket had been passed down through generations of his family, traditionally given to those who were recognized as boundary walkers, individuals who moved between worlds and helped others understand connections not visible to ordinary eyes. My grandmother told me that every few generations, a child is born who can speak to our relatives in the animal world, Joseph had written, not with words, but with the heart. You were such a child, Lily Mitchell. And now, watch your own daughter carefully, for these gifts often pass through bloodlines. Lily looked up from the letter to see her 3-year-old daughter, Emma, sitting by the cabin window, her small palms pressed against the glass as she gazed with unusual intensity into the forest beyond. Following her daughter's line of sight, Lily caught a glimpse of movement at the tree line, the distinctive shape of a bear cub, cautiously exploring the edge of the yard under its mother's watchful eye. As Emma turned to her with eyes full of wonder, Lily felt a shiver of recognition. The circle was continuing, the connections extending into new generations, the boundaries between worlds growing ever more permeable through the simple, profound power of recognition across differences. And so the story continues, not just in the pages of scientific journals or documentary films, but in the lived experience of each person who chooses to reach across boundaries, each creature who responds to compassion with recognition, each moment where what separates us proves less powerful than what connects us. For in the end, perhaps the most remarkable legacy of that day by Silver Creek isn't just the scientific discoveries or cultural insights it eventually yielded, but the simple reminder that in our most authentic moments of connection, whether with each other or with the wider community of life, we glimpse something essential about what it truly means to be alive in this intricate, interconnected world. We are never as separate as we seem. And the hand that reaches out to help another being, regardless of species, regardless of difference, touches something fundamental in the fabric of existence itself. As Emma Mitchell grew, the similarities between her childhood and her mother's became increasingly apparent. By age 5, she displayed an uncanny ability to sense animal presence before adults noticed anything, often falling silent and staring into the woods seconds before wildlife appeared. What began as a curious family observation soon developed into something more profound. During a routine research trip when Emma was 6, Lily brought her daughter to a remote observation blind where trail cameras had been tracking a female bear with new cubs. The research team had been carefully documenting the cubs' developmental milestones from a safe distance. What happened that day would become another chapter in the extraordinary saga that had begun with Lily's own childhood encounter. "Mom," Emma whispered as they settled into the observation blind, "the bear mom is worried about her smallest baby." Lily glanced at her daughter, then back at the forest where no bears were yet visible. "What makes you say that, sweetheart?" Emma shrugged, the gesture disarmingly simple for the complexity of her insight. "I can just feel it. The little one is sick." 20 minutes later, when the bear family finally appeared at the edge of the clearing, the researchers immediately noticed what Emma had somehow sensed. The smallest cub was indeed struggling. Its movements labored as it trailed behind its siblings. The mother bear repeatedly circled back, nudging the weakened cub forward with gentle persistence. Dr. Eliza Washington, the veterinary specialist on the research team, studied the cub through high-powered binoculars. "Possible respiratory infection," she murmured, making notes. "How did you know, Emma?" The child's response was delivered with the simple clarity that often accompanies profound truths. "I heard her worrying." Later that evening, back at their cabin, Lily found Emma sitting cross-legged on her bed, eyes closed in what appeared to be deep concentration. "Emma, what are you doing, sweetie?" Sending good thoughts to the sick bear baby, Emma replied without opening her eyes. Grandpa Joseph taught me how. The reference startled Lily. Joseph Running Elk had passed away before Emma was born. She had shared stories about the elder with her daughter, but never mentioned his teachings about sending thoughts to animals. "When did Grandpa Joseph teach you that?" Lily asked carefully. Emma opened her eyes. "In my dream. He said I should picture the sick cub getting stronger, wrapped in golden light. He said thoughts can travel between hearts if they're strong enough." A chill ran through Lily that had nothing to do with the evening air. The description matched exactly the healing visualization Joseph had once taught her, a practice she had never shared with her daughter. The next morning, the research team found something unexpected in the footage from their overnight cameras. The mother bear had brought her weakened cub to the stream near the observation area, the same stream where Lily's story had begun years earlier. There, she had meticulously washed the cub, cleaning its fur with a gentleness that belied her massive strength, before guiding it to drink from a specific location where mineral-rich water bubbled up from an underground spring. "She's treating the cub," Dr. Washington observed with amazement. "Those minerals have natural antibiotic properties. Traditional human healers have used water from that spring for generations." 2 days later, trail cameras captured the cub moving with renewed energy. The respiratory symptoms noticeably improved. When Lily shared this news with Emma, her daughter nodded as though she had expected nothing less. "The bear mom knows lots of medicine," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Her grandmother taught her, just like Grandpa Joseph is teaching me." The incident prompted Lily to begin documenting Emma's unusual perceptions more systematically, creating a private research journal dedicated to what she carefully termed potential interspecies empathic phenomena. As a scientist, she maintained professional skepticism, considering alternative explanations for each observation. As a mother, and as someone who had experienced her own inexplicable connection with the natural world, she remained open to possibilities that extended beyond conventional scientific frameworks. When Emma was 8, the Mitchell family's story took a dramatic turn that thrust them back into the public spotlight. A severe drought had gripped the region for months, draining streams and forcing wildlife into increasingly desperate searches for water. Forest fire risk had reached critical levels, with fire crews on constant alert. At the university research station where Lily was conducting a summer field study, Emma spent her days exploring the surrounding area under the watchful eyes of research assistants. One hot afternoon, she disappeared from sight briefly during a routine nature walk. The graduate student supervising her found Emma standing at the edge of a dry streambed, her expression troubled. "What's wrong, Emma?" the student asked, taking her hand. "The water is hiding," Emma replied. "It's underground, but the animals can't reach it. They're so thirsty." She pointed to a specific section of the parched earth. "It's right there, but they need help." The student gently led Emma back to the research station, making a mental note of the location but thinking little of the child's comments. That evening, Emma became increasingly agitated, insisting they needed to help the water come out, at the spot she had identified. After Emma went to bed still distressed, Lily mentioned the incident to her colleague, Dr. Marcus Rivera, now a hydrologist specializing in groundwater systems. Though skeptical, he agreed to bring ground-penetrating radar equipment to the site the following day, primarily to reassure Emma that they were taking her concerns seriously. What the radar revealed left the research team stunned. A substantial underground water source, an aquifer branch that had gone undetected in previous surveys, lay less than 6 feet beneath the surface, exactly where Emma had pointed. Under normal circumstances, this water would have naturally fed the stream, but shifting earth during a minor earthquake months earlier had blocked the flow. There's a significant water pocket trapped by that clay layer, Dr. Rivera explained, showing Lily the radar images. In theory, if we could breach that barrier, it would restore flow to at least part of the stream system. The discovery led to an emergency conservation intervention. Working with local authorities, the research team carefully excavated a narrow channel that would allow the trapped water to resume its natural path to the surface. As predicted, within hours of breaking through the clay barrier, water began seeping into the dry streambed. By the following morning, a small but steady flow had established itself, creating a critical water source in the drought-stricken landscape. Motion-activated cameras placed around the new spring captured a parade of desperate wildlife coming to drink: deer, smaller mammals, birds, and eventually bears. Among the visitors, recorded shortly before dawn on the third day, was a female bear with the distinctive ear marking that identified her as a direct descendant of the bear Lily had saved as a child. The bear approached the spring cautiously, drank deeply, then appeared to investigate the disturbed earth where the excavation had taken place. In a moment that would later be viewed millions of times in slowed-down footage, she seemed to look directly at the camera before placing her paw deliberately on the damp ground in what almost appeared to be a gesture of acknowledgement. The Miracle Spring, as local media dubbed it, became a focal point for both scientific research and public interest. How had Emma known about the underground water? Was it merely a lucky guess, or something more? The Mitchell family found themselves once again navigating the complex intersection of scientific inquiry, media attention, and deeply personal experience. For Lily, the incident catalyzed a profound professional evolution. After years of conducting her research within carefully established scientific parameters, she began developing a more integrative framework that she termed trans-species cognitive ecology, an approach that incorporated indigenous knowledge systems, traditional ecological perspectives, and rigorous empirical methodology to study the complex ways in which humans and animals perceive and respond to shared environments. What we're proposing, she explained during a controversial but widely attended symposium at the World Conservation Congress, is not a return to anthropomorphism or magical thinking, but rather an expansion of our investigative framework to include phenomena that have been consistently reported across cultures and throughout human history, yet marginalized by conventional Western science. Her work attracted both criticism and support from the scientific community. Skeptics dismissed it as pseudoscience dressed in academic language. Supporters hailed it as a necessary evolution in understanding complex ecological relationships. The debate intensified when Emma, now 10 years old, demonstrated an ability to consistently predict animal movement patterns with accuracy that defied statistical probability. In a carefully controlled blind study conducted by independent researchers, Emma correctly identified which feeding stations woodland animals would visit on specific days with 87% accuracy, far exceeding chance expectations. More remarkable still, when asked how she knew, her explanation detailed emotional and social factors within animal family groups that conventional tracking methods couldn't detect. The mother deer won't go to the North Station today because her baby got scared there yesterday, she would explain. Or, the young male bear is avoiding the East Station because the older bear left a message saying it's his territory now. When researchers later analyzed camera footage and tracks, they frequently found evidence supporting Emma's explanations, signs of distress behavior in the fawn at the North Station the previous day, territorial marking by the older bear at the East Station. As public interest in Emma's abilities grew, Lily faced the challenge of protecting her daughter from exploitation while honoring the potential importance of what she represented. It was a balancing act that became increasingly difficult as Emma approached adolescence and began asserting her own perspective on her unusual gifts. "I want to help," Emma insisted during a family discussion about her future. "The animals are trying to tell us important things, but most people don't know how to listen." Nathan, who had remained a grounding force throughout the family's extraordinary journey, suggested a compromise. What if we established a special research track for Emma? Not as a subject to be studied, but as a developing researcher with a unique perspective. This approach led to the creation of the Junior Ecological Observers Program, initially designed for Emma, but soon expanded to include other children who demonstrated unusual sensitivities to natural environments. Under appropriate supervision and with careful ethical guidelines, these young observers contributed perspectives that often revealed patterns overlooked by conventional research methods. The program's first major breakthrough came during a wildlife corridor mapping project. Conservation biologists had been tracking animal movements to identify critical pathways between fragmented habitats, information essential for effective land protection. Despite extensive camera trapping and tracking data, certain animal behaviors remained puzzling, with creatures seemingly avoiding corridors that offered optimal conditions. Emma and 2 other children in the program spent a week walking the proposed corridors, then presented a map marked with what they called invisible boundaries, areas where they sensed fear, tension, or avoidance from the animals. When these emotional landscapes were overlaid with historical data, researchers discovered that many corresponded precisely with locations of past traumatic events, poaching sites, vehicle collision hotspots, and former predator trap areas, some dating back decades. "They're remembering," Emma explained simply. "Just because something happened a long time ago doesn't mean it's forgotten. The memory stays in the land and the animals can feel it." This insight led to a revolutionary approach in wildlife corridor design that incorporated what researchers termed emotional topography, the layered history of events that influenced animal perception and behavior beyond physical landscape features. By rerouting corridors to avoid these trauma-imprinted locations, conservation planners achieved significantly higher utilization rates by target species. As Emma entered her teenage years, her connection with the bear lineage descended from her mother's original rescue took on new dimensions. The bears, now in their 4th generation since the original cub, had developed behaviors so distinctive that they were classified as a unique cultural subpopulation in scientific literature. Unlike typical bears that avoided human observation, these individuals permitted themselves to be seen at specific distances, often appeared to monitor human activities in their territory, and displayed what researchers cautiously termed apparent intentional communication behaviors, consistent movements and gestures that seemed directed at human observers. On Emma's 15th birthday, the family returned to Silver Creek for a private celebration. As twilight settled over the forest, Emma wandered a short distance from the picnic area, drawn to the exact spot where her mother had once reached out to save a drowning bear cub. Standing quietly at the water's edge, she closed her eyes and extended her hand, palm upward, a gesture of openness she couldn't have explained if asked. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle babbling of the creek and distant birdsong. Then came a sound that caused Nathan and Lily to freeze where they stood, the distinctive huffing breath of a bear approaching through the underbrush. Before they could call out a warning, a large female bear emerged from the trees on the opposite bank. Though they recognized her distinctive markings, identification wasn't necessary. The bear's deliberate, calm demeanor as she gazed at Emma told them everything they needed to know. For nearly 5 minutes, bear and girl regarded each other across the flowing water that had once been the site of an impossible rescue. Then, in a gesture that would later be analyzed frame by frame by researchers and spiritual leaders alike, the bear carefully selected a small river stone with her claws, placed it gently on a fallen log at the water's edge, and backed away into the forest. When Emma retrieved the stone, she found it was unlike others in the creek, a rare piece of turquoise that had no geological business being in that watershed. Geological analysis later confirmed it had likely been carried from mountains over 100 miles away. A gift, Joseph Running Elk's grandson explained when shown the stone months later. In our traditions, turquoise represents the connection between earth and sky, between different worlds. It is given to those who can walk between those worlds. As Emma continued to develop her unique abilities throughout her teenage years, she began articulating insights about animal consciousness that challenged fundamental assumptions in cognitive ecology. Working alongside her mother and a growing network of researchers open to her unique perspective, she helped pioneer new methodologies for studying what she called emotional intelligence across species boundaries. "The mistake we've been making," she explained in a journal article co-authored with her mother when she was 17, "is assuming that different forms of intelligence must be comparable to be valid. Just as light can be both a particle and a wave, consciousness can express itself in patterns we recognize as human-like, and in completely different modalities we're only beginning to perceive." The implications of this work extended far beyond academic interest. As climate change and habitat loss intensified pressures on wildlife worldwide, Emma's ability to anticipate animal responses to environmental stressors provided crucial insights for conservation efforts. In several documented cases, her predictions about how animal populations would adapt to changing conditions proved more accurate than computer models based on historical data. "They're more adaptable than we think," she insisted during a United Nations Environmental Summit where she had been invited as a special youth delegate. "But adaptation requires choice, and choice requires freedom. We need to protect not just habitats, but the possibility of self-determination for other species." On Emma's 18th birthday, as she prepared to begin university studies in a pioneering program that combined ecology, cognitive science, and indigenous knowledge systems, a package arrived from Joseph Running Elk's grandson. Inside was a journal bound in weathered leather, filled with the elder's handwriting, observations, dreams, and teachings he had recorded specifically for Emma in the final years of his life. "For the one who will help us remember how to listen," read the inscription on the first page. "The circle continues through you." That evening, as Emma sat reading the journal by the window of her childhood bedroom, she noticed movement at the forest's edge. Setting the book aside, she stepped onto the porch, somehow knowing what she would see. The female bear, with the distinctive earmarking, stood at the boundary between forest and yard, a now familiar figure in the twilight. Beside her, nearly grown, was the cub she had nursed back to health with water from the mineral spring years earlier. And beside that younger bear, tiny and uncertain on new legs, tottered a new cub, the next generation in a lineage forever entwined with the Mitchell family's destiny. As Emma smiled in recognition, the mother bear rose briefly onto her hind legs, not in threat but in acknowledgement, a gesture that spoke across the boundaries of species. Then she shepherded her family back into the protective embrace of the forest, disappearing among the shadows but never truly leaving. Inside, Lily watched her daughter from the window, witnessing the moment with a scientist's curiosity and a mother's understanding. The circle that had begun with her own small hands reaching toward a drowning cub had expanded beyond anything she could have imagined, touching lives across species, across generations, across worlds of understanding. The research would continue. Questions would remain. Skeptics would debate the significance of what the Mitchell women had experienced. But in that moment, watching her daughter commune with bears that seemed as much family as research subjects, Lily understood something that transcended scientific categorization. Some connections don't require explanation to be real. Some bridges between worlds exist not because we build them deliberately, but because they reveal themselves in moments of pure compassion, when one being recognizes another's need and reaches across the divide without hesitation. And sometimes, the hand that reaches out, whether human or paw, touches something more profound than mere physical rescue. It touches the ancient, shared current of life that flows through all beings, reminding us that the boundaries we perceive are more permeable than we know. As night fell over Whispering Woods, the story that had begun with a child saving a bear continued its unfolding across generations of both species, a testament to the enduring power of that first impossible connection and the ripples of understanding it had sent through countless lives. And somewhere in the starlit forest, bears dreamed of human hands reaching out across rushing water, while in the warm safety of the cabin, a young woman dreamed of forests where humans and bears walked side by side, each guiding the other toward a future where such connections were no longer extraordinary, but recognized as part of the natural order of a world where compassion knows no bounds. 25 years after Emma's groundbreaking presentation, the forests of Whispering Woods had become a global sanctuary, one of the first interspecies conservation zones where human activity was carefully balanced with the needs and autonomies of the wild creatures who called it home. The Mitchell family's legacy had transformed our understanding of animal consciousness, but for Dr. Emma Mitchell, now 50 years old with silver streaks in her dark hair, the most meaningful achievement wasn't measured in research papers or conservation policies. It was the quiet revolution in how humans and animals interacted in this special place, a revolution built on recognition, respect, and reciprocity. On a crisp autumn morning, Emma walked the familiar path to Silver Creek with her own 10-year-old daughter, Sophia. The child had inherited not just her mother's and grandmother's dark eyes, but also their remarkable sensitivity to the emotional states of animals. 3 generations of Mitchell women, each carrying forward the thread of connection that had begun with a small hand reaching toward a drowning bear cub. "This is where it all started," Emma explained, kneeling beside her daughter at the edge of the creek. The memorial stone had weathered with time, but the hand and paw prints remained clear, a testament to a moment that had changed countless lives. Sophia ran her fingers over the engraved shapes. Did Great-Grandma Nathan and Great-Grandma Olivia really think Mom Lily would drown trying to save the bear? Emma smiled at her daughter's question. They were terrified. But sometimes fear gives way to something more powerful. As they sat by the water's edge, Emma reached into her pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. "I've been waiting for the right moment to give you this," she said, her voice soft with emotion. "Today feels right." From the pouch, she removed the turquoise stone, the one given to her by the bear so many years ago. It still gleamed with the same blue-green brilliance, a color that seemed to capture both water and sky. "This was a gift," Emma explained, placing it in her daughter's small palm, "from one who recognized something special in me. Now I'm passing it to you because you carry that same gift." Sophia studied the stone, her expression solemn beyond her years. "It feels warm," she whispered. "It carries the energy of every hand that has held it," Emma said. "Joseph's hand's mine and now yours, and it carries something else too, the memory of a connection between species that most people once thought impossible." As Sophia clutched the stone, a rustling in the underbrush drew their attention. Emma felt her daughter go still beside her, the child's breathing changing subtly in the way that always signaled her awareness of animal presence. "They're coming," Sophia whispered, not with fear, but with quiet certainty. From the forest emerged not one bear, but three. A massive matriarch with distinguished gray around her muzzle, a younger adult female, and a half-grown cub. Though genetic testing had confirmed their lineage years ago, no scientific validation was needed for those who knew what to look for. The distinctive ear marking had been passed down through generations, as had the extraordinary behaviors that set this bear family apart. The aging matriarch, a direct descendant of the original cub Lily had saved, moved with the careful dignity of her years. Researchers estimated her age at nearly 25, remarkably old for a wild bear. She had been monitored throughout her life, her movements and behaviors meticulously documented as part of the longest continuous animal cognition study in scientific history. But in this moment, she was not a research subject. She was a living bridge between worlds. The matriarch approached the creek's edge opposite Emma and Sophia, close enough for them to see the wisdom in her dark eyes, but maintaining the respectful distance that had characterized the Mitchell-bear relationship for decades. The younger bears remained slightly behind her, watching with evident curiosity. What happened next would be debated in scientific circles for years, though those present needed no explanation beyond what their hearts understood. The old bear deliberately picked up a smooth river stone in her mouth, placed it gently on the ground before her, then used her paw to push it forward toward the humans. Sophia looked questioningly at her mother. Emma nodded, and the child carefully made her way across the shallow creek, her movements slow and deliberate. When she reached the stone, she set down the turquoise beside it, then backed away with the same respectful care. The old bear studied the turquoise, her massive head tilting slightly. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to Emma's eyes, she placed her paw briefly on the blue-green stone before turning back toward the forest. The younger bears followed, but the cub paused, looking back at Sophia with an expression that seemed to hold recognition beyond explanation. As the bears disappeared into the trees, Sophia returned to her mother's side, her eyes wide with wonder. "What does it mean?" she asked. Emma drew her daughter close, her gaze fixed on the spot where the bears had stood. "It means the circle continues," she said softly. "It means we remember each other." That evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, 3 generations of Mitchell women gathered on the porch of the family cabin. Lily, now in her 70s but still sharp-eyed and passionate about her life's work, sat in a rocking chair with her granddaughter Sophia curled beside her. Emma stood at the railing, watching the forest darken as day gave way to night. "Do you think they understand what they started?" Sophia asked, looking up at her grandmother. "The first bear and Mom Lily, I mean." Lily smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening with the warmth of accumulated wisdom. "I think understanding comes in many forms," she said. "I don't remember the moment itself, I was too young, but I've spent my life feeling its echo, seeing how a single act of compassion created ripples that touched so many lives." From inside the cabin, Nathan's voice called them for dinner. At 85, he had survived Olivia by several years, but remained the family's steady anchor, his practical nature balancing the Mitchell women's more intuitive approach to the world. As they gathered around the table, a familiar sound drifted through the open window, the distinctive call of a bear, not in threat or distress, but in what researchers now classified as a social vocalization. The 3 generations of Mitchell women exchanged knowing glances, while Nathan shook his head with the bemused expression of one who had witnessed miracles, but still found them astonishing. "Some things defy explanation," he said, echoing words he had spoken many times throughout the extraordinary journey their family had taken, and maybe that's as it should be. Later that night, long after Sophia had gone to bed, Emma found her mother standing at the edge of the yard, gazing into the darkness. "Do you ever wonder," Lily asked without turning, "what would have happened if I hadn't reached out that day? If I'd been just a little more afraid, or my parents a little quicker to pull me back?" Emma joined her mother, their shoulders touching in comfortable familiarity. "I used to," she admitted, "but not anymore." "Why not?" "Because I don't think there was ever a choice," Emma said softly. "Not really. When you saw the cub drowning, reaching out wasn't a decision you made, it was who you were. Just as the bear choosing not to attack wasn't a calculation, but a recognition." Lily nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Joseph used to say that the greatest wisdom comes from knowing we're part of something larger than ourselves. I didn't fully understand what he meant until I watched you with the bears, and now Sophia." Above them, stars blanketed the night sky, countless points of light spanning unimaginable distances. Yet, in that moment, the space between species, between generations, between different ways of knowing the world, felt no wider than the breadth of a hand reaching out in compassion. "The circle continues," Emma echoed her earlier words to Sophia. "Not just through us, but through them too." As if in confirmation, a soft, huffing breath sounded from the darkness beyond the yard. A bear, keeping vigil just beyond the edge of sight. 3 generations of Mitchell women had extended their hands across the divide between worlds, and 3 generations of bears had responded with a recognition that defied conventional understanding. In that sacred space between reaching and receiving, between offering and accepting, something profound had taken root, a bridge built of mutual recognition that would continue long after any individual human or bear had passed from the world. A legacy of connection that would endure through time, carried forward in the hearts and minds of those who remembered that the boundaries between us are never as fixed as they seem. And as the Mitchell women stood together beneath the star-filled sky, surrounded by the breathing presence of the forest and all its inhabitants, they understood the deepest truth that had emerged from their extraordinary journey. When we reach beyond the boundaries that appear to separate us from the rest of life, when we extend ourselves in moments of genuine compassion without calculation of return, we touch not just the immediate need before us, but the very fabric of existence itself. We become part of a story larger than our own, a current of connection flowing through generations, rippling outward in ways we may never fully comprehend, but that forever change the world's unfolding. In the simple act of a child reaching toward a drowning bear cub decades ago, worlds that had seemed separate had recognized their shared heartbeat. And in that recognition, both had been transformed. The turquoise stone and river rock now sat side by side on the cabin's windowsill. Gifts exchanged across the boundary between species. Tokens of a relationship that had redefined our understanding of consciousness, connection, and compassion. They would remain there as touchstones for future generations, testaments to a truth both simple and profound. Some hands reach across chasms so vast they seem unbridgeable. Some hearts recognize each other despite differences that seem insurmountable, and some stories continue unfolding long after they seem to have ended. As night deepened over whispering woods, the circle of connection between humans and bears remained unbroken, a living testament to the enduring power of that first impossible moment when a small hand reached out across rushing water and changed everything. For in the end, perhaps the most profound truth to emerge from the Mitchell family's extraordinary journey was this: compassion is not merely a human virtue or a social adaptation, but a fundamental force in the universe, as essential to our existence as gravity or light. And when we allow that force to move through us without hesitation or fear, we become channels for a power that knows no bounds, a force capable of bridging worlds, connecting generations, and reminding us all of the ancient truth that beats at the heart of existence. We are never truly separate, and the hand that reaches out in compassion, whether human or paw, touches not just another being, but the very essence of what it means to be alive in this wondrous, interconnected world. Did this moment take your breath away? Share this story to remind the world that even the smallest hands can create the biggest miracles, and that compassion knows no bounds.